Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I am Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran, and today we are taking a look at another leaked video from Ukraine. This is Ukrainian troops attacking Russian tanks one by one in Donbas. But more importantly, we are going to show, wow, this video illustrates one of the key ways this war is changing for the individual soldiers fighting it and what it's going to mean for the war going forward. Let's get into it. So right here, this says this is the Donbas. One, I want to point out, holy smokes, this region is obliterated. Now, we've known that the Donbas has been in conflict for a long time, right? Since 2014, when it declared itself an independent republic backed heavily by Russia. But more importantly, the Donbas has not been economically a stable or viable region. The Ukraine obviously has not supported it. The Donbas region produces a lot of industrial goods, but Ukraine, the larger country of Ukraine, Western Ukraine, is their biggest buyer. So with Ukraine cut off, right, there's not a lot of economic activity. There's a general belief that the Russian government at large has actually spent a lot of money supporting the Donbas regions economically. So things probably weren't great at the outset, and now with the conflict, you can see this has been just obliterated. What do we have here? We have 3 Russian tanks, 1, 2, 3, and you can see they come under an anti-tank unit's fire. I'm pretty sure this is a, sometimes these titles are not that accurate. I'm pretty sure this is in fact an anti-armor ambush. It seems pretty classic, right? 3 Russian tanks, no infantry escorts, no troop carriers, being attacked by Ukraine anti-armor teams. This has been a standard tactic of the war, but let's take a look at the Russian response. This is going to show us what has changed in this conflict. So the first tank, right, comes under fire right here and immediately returns fire. That is actually a great response by the crew, and it's not something that we've seen previously. We've seen a lot of times where tanks take fire and seem to hesitate and seem reluctant to put rounds downrange if they can't dial in exactly where the enemy is, right? Returning fire has its own value, even if it's not necessarily super accurate fire. So first off, they return fire. Second, watch these other 2 tanks. Sorry, I'm implementing this new control button so I can point where my mouse is. Okay, look at this. They immediately start to back up, and you can see here, now they're backing up to this intersection. Watch what happens. First off, we'll back it up just a little bit. Watch this center tank here. Watch as we back it up. If my video wants to load, it's thinking hard. There we go. Look. This tank, okay. Watch the center tank here as we play it. Boom. So lead tank takes a hit. This tank immediately pivots its turret down here. So they go from a maneuver or a transiting formation, right? All turrets pointed forward, to a combat ready formation and start to establish a 360 security perimeter. And now look, they're actually starting to take some evasive action. They're getting out of the kill zone right away. Now, it's possible, though extremely unlikely, that Russian troops more recently sent to the front are getting better training than the ones who were trained in armored warfare from before. But honestly, given every single thing we've seen about Russia, that seems extremely unlikely. What's vastly more likely is that we have reached the 100-day mark of this conflict. And what's interesting, when you have the 100-day mark of a conflict, the troops have gone through the steep learning curve, surviving troops. And the U.S. Army found the exact same thing when they began to research units who deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. And the U.S. Army has 20 years of data on those conflicts. And it found that consistently the most dangerous time for a unit was the first 100 days of their deployment. Deployments for most of the war were 12 months long. So less than the first third was the time where the likelihood of taking casualties was the greatest. Also, real quick, guys, I do want to point out that I have this dream of getting my silver plaque on the wall. If you can just hit subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything, and it doesn't mean you're going to see every single video, but it will make a huge difference to me, and it will be a huge deal for me to get that silver plaque. It really will. So thanks again. Okay, so the U.S. Army found that the first 100 days were the highest casualty producing, were the days where they were, was the period where units took the most casualties. And that was because they themselves hadn't polished their combat operations through repetition to the point where they were really fast and effective. It also meant that they didn't have a good sense of the environment. What are the threats in the environment? What is a suspicious activity? Here's a personal story of mine. When I was deployed to Afghanistan, I was trained that one of the signs of a potential IED or improvised explosive device was a pile of rocks that either they would conceal the IED, or they would be used as an aiming stake to help time when the IED should go off. Well, when I deployed to Afghanistan, I realized that piles of rocks were used for everything, from marking out the foundations to a house that was going to be constructed, to annotating where in a field one farmer's claim ended and another's began. Some people just seemed to stack rocks to stack rocks. Some of them would be put up, you would see dozens of stacks of rocks in sort of an improvised fence maybe to stop vehicles from driving too close to a house. There were sometimes fields and fields and fields of just stacks of rocks, probably because someone didn't want anyone else to put anything in their field. It was crazy. And so I was stuck saying, man, I don't know how to identify an IED now, because those were one of the most important cues from my training. But over time, over months and months of patrolling, I learned what sort of areas the enemy would choose to use their employ IEDs and how to avoid them. I learned when the vibe of an area changed, because oftentimes the locals would know when an attack or IED was planned. And so you would know, you would look around and say, wow, it's the middle of the day and there's no women or children running around. Well, this is a problem. Or you'd say, hey, there's no one around, period. It would be, and as soon as that would happen, we'd all sense that vibe change, and we would instantly change the plan. We would say, hey, we're taking a different route. Hey, move the vehicles. Hey, we're going to drive at half speed. Hey, we're going to do anything to thwart a potential attacker's plan. But we needed that first 100 days to learn what the enemy's preferred tactics were and how we could effectively counter them. The advantage, of course, is that we all survived that 100 days. And so we were all, as a unit, able to learn and grow and improve ourselves and get good enough to survive the remaining 265. If you're a Russian troop, and let's pull this screen up back, if you're a Russian tank commander, man, this has been a hard 100 days. And the problem is you're stuck. How many of these tank crews have been here since day one? And the answer, this appears to be actually a fairly experienced tank crew. They're doing a lot of things right. But the title of the video isn't exaggerating. So let's watch. Come on, there we go. So look, the tanks instantly react. This tank begins to back up, continually providing covering fire. This tank turns and moves down. You can see this tank takes what looks like maybe a glancing hit. It doesn't look like they have been necessarily finished. I didn't see the characteristic explosion of a javelin or an NLAW or something detonating. So you can see they immediately are pushing out of the kill zone. A new tank is in the lead, and you can see this third tank is actually providing the covering fire as the other two tanks begin their withdrawal. But you can see they are held up here, and they might be trying to actually push out. They might be trying to make sure that their last tank remains intact. And you can see maybe they've spotted something. They start to back up. And yep, there's probably the backblast of an NLAW. And here is here is a tank being destroyed. And you feel bad. You feel bad because war is horrible, right? But this tank seemed to have been doing this tank unit seems to have been doing everything right. They responded in a way that was effective. They were getting out of the kill zone. They were covering each other. They were maneuvering well. This is an experienced tank unit, but war isn't just about experience and skill. There's always the luck component, unfortunately. Or unfortunately for this Russian tank unit, fortunately for the Ukrainians, they are able, sometimes your number just comes up. And for the Russians, this is even worse, because every time you lose someone who gets to that, especially a coherent unit who has that, there's the second tank going, or maybe this looks like it could actually be a final hit maybe on this same tank. It doesn't look like it's facing in a different direction. But again, some of these videos, this is obviously, you can see the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces are putting these videos out. They are Ukrainian propaganda, obviously. But again, I think it's really important to note that this is, okay, we don't, do we need to see this? Yeah, this is just the tank continuing to cook off. We're going to make that small because, YouTube gets a little wonky about that. But this is the real crisis for the Ukrainians, or for the Russians, because you have to have maybe not obviously 100%, but you have to have a plurality, a lot of your combat troops gain those 100 days of experience so that they can start to pass it along to the other units. If you've ever seen the movie Fury, the broad arc of that movie is a movie version, obviously, of what I'm talking about, right? You have this brand new replacement who's replacing an experienced soldier who was a casualty. But he is able to be brought into this already very, very veteran tank crew who's able to quickly prevent him from making simple mistakes, able to quickly bring him up to the level of the experienced tank crew members. And that happens at obviously an individual tank crew level, at a platoon, company, and battalion level. But the more you lose soldiers, if you lose your fighting forces too fast, they never gain that experience. And you could see, obviously, these are a good tank unit, but the Ukrainians were also good. Their ambush was excellently timed, well executed. The location was brilliantly chosen, and it went beautifully for them too. So this is why you have the not just arms race, but an experience race as well, as both sides try to accrue the experience necessary to fight, survive, and win in combat. And from the news stories we've seen, it seems like both sides are having quite a bit of attrition, but the question is, who is going to be able to draw on not just having warm bodies, warm people? Man, I'm going to get demonetized. But you want to have experienced soldiers leading and fighting and eventually training your troops. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me on this. Let me know in the comments if you have other stuff, or if you ever served and had an experienced soldier, sailor, airman, or marine take you under their wing. I always like these stories, and I want to get more into kind of the military lore of the past. So if you have any other crazy military stories from back in the day, yeah, stick those in the comments too. Okay, anyway, if you want to see my not quite acceptable to YouTube reactions to videos, you want to come on to the Patreon. Thanks to our Lieutenant Tier patrons. I'll see you in the next one.